Glaciers in the world are decreasing in mass, they're thinning and retreating essentially all over the world. The glaciers retreat, they're very sensitive to temperature changes because they're warmer the temperatures, they're more melt. And that is the main reason is the temperature change. And part of that is of course anthropogenic. The evidence is very striking. There's no doubt that glaciers are retreating and losing mass and thinning. We have now a lot of satellite data, we have direct observations on glaciers, and what is new during the last 10 years that we really have a good global picture due to satellite data. Like 50 years ago, we were relying on a few glaciers, a few measurements, but now the satellite data is striking and consistent with our understanding, and it's really decreasing everywhere. First of all, the mass loss, how many percent is lost in the next 100 years varies very much from region to region, and also the average thinning rates vary. Like in areas with very little ice, we see large thinning rates, for instance in the European Alps, in the Pyrenees, in the Caucasus. But those regions don't really affect sea level because there's not very much ice. Whereas in the Arctic, the thinning rates are not that high, but there's so much ice that so much mass is lost that it affects sea level rise directly. So it really depends where you are, why it matters. But the regions with little ice, why it matters is because it changes stream flow and has all kinds of other effects. On a global scale, the main effect is contribution to sea level rise, which is in the same order as the Greenland ice sheet. So it's a large component of the sea level budget. Locally, it affects stream flow. In some regions, you have more water because of the glacier melt. In other regions, you have less water. It affects hazards because it's rocks, rock falls, and because of destabilizing ground. And it affects also tourism indirectly because the landscapes disappear and change. If the glaciers disappear, the landscapes change, and it might not be so attractive anymore for people to do their vacation there. I mean, the melting of ice, both Antarctica, Greenland, and all other glaciers in the world, is now the dominant source of sea level rise. And ice sheets, Antarctica, Greenland, and the other glaciers more or less contribute equally. I mean, Greenland contributes most, then the other glaciers in the world, and then the Antarctic ice sheet. But the mass loss of ice is really the dominant source of sea level rise. Globally, definitely, we project under a high emission scenario that about 36–40% of all volume is lost. But regionally, in areas where there's little ice at the moment, like the European Alps or the Pyrenees or Caucasus, we project mass losses of 80% and more by the end of the century. So many glaciers will disappear. Emission scenarios do make a difference. The more emissions, the larger the mass losses. But even if we stopped any emissions at the moment and the climate, just continue the climate we have right now, the glaciers would retreat because the glaciers respond slowly. So even without any climate change, there's a committed mass loss over the next decades or hundreds of years. I mean, it has gained a lot of attention in the last years. So I think it has been a focus. What is sometimes overlooked is in the sea level budget that it's not only Antarctica and Greenland, that it's also the other glaciers that are only 1% of all ice volume on Earth, that they are major contributors to sea level rise. That is sometimes overlooked.